Good morning, everyone. This is a special report from News Channel 9. I'm Dan Cummings. We're going to take you live now to the Syracuse Public Safety Building, where the police department and the mayor are holding a news conference after an almost unthinkable crime last night in the city. An 11-month-old baby girl shot and killed. Two other young children, ages 3 and 8, were also shot. This happened in the back of a car. The girls were in a car. And it happened on Grant Avenue, about a block from the intersection of Bellevue Ave and South Geddes Street, just before 7 o'clock last night. The neighborhood is adjacent to the Shea Middle School and the Bellevue Elementary School. Police have been trying to piece this together ever since. Let's join the news conference now with Police Chief Kenton Buckner. He'll also be joined at this news conference by Deputy Chief Derek McGork and Mayor Ben Walsh.
Everyone ready? Good morning. We would like to start our press conference on an update in the shooting that we had yesterday in our community. We will have updates given by Chief McGork, who's over our investigative bureau. The purpose for that, which is a little bit unusual on these critical incidents, I recently just had an eye exam, so I'm not able to read anything right now. So Chief McGork's going to give you that. Afterwards, the mayor will have some talking points for you, and then we will take questions from you.
Good morning. As far as the timeline is concerned for last night's shooting, at about 6:51 last night, Syracuse Police Department responded to the 100 block of Lincoln Avenue in regards to a shooting with injuries. When they arrived on scene, they located 3 shooting victims, all 3 females, one 11 months old, one 3 years old, and one 8-year-old. As the investigation progressed, it led us to the 300 block of Grant Avenue. We learned that the victim's vehicle was occupied by 2 adults and the 3 children. They were traveling in the 300 block of Grant Avenue, eastbound, and the suspect vehicle was traveling westbound at the same location. Shots were fired at the victim's vehicle. As the victim drove off, at some point thereafter, she realized that the children were injured. She drove to the 100 block of Lincoln Ave, where she called 911. One of the females and 3 children were taken to Upstate Hospital for treatment, and unfortunately, the 11-month-old child succumbed to her injuries. At this time, the investigation is active and ongoing. We will get you guys updates as we can. Please be patient with us. The homicide squad and the crime scene unit are diligently working on this case, and as we're able to get you guys some information, we will. Mayor.
Thanks, Chief. This is a nightmare. An unimaginable tragedy. All of my thoughts right now are with the family, the 11-month-old whose life was stolen, the 2 other children recovering from their injuries, and all of the loved ones and friends who are suffering today. When I received the first report of the incident, I went straight to the scene. I want to acknowledge those first on the scene, police, fire, EMTs, in rendering aid and offering protection to the victims. You are all heroes. This tragedy is the definition of senseless. How could anyone in their right mind point a gun at a car with children in it in broad daylight and pull the trigger? It is incomprehensible. The trauma inflicted on these children, their family, the first responders, and the community will be with us forever. I want to join the chiefs in asking that anyone that has information, please share it with the police department. I want to thank those in the community who have already provided assistance to the investigation, and again urge anyone who has information to get it to SPD. Those responsible will be found and held accountable to the fullest extent of the law. Let me turn it back over to Steve. No further questions.
Please keep in mind that we are just beyond 12 hours or so into our investigation, so you all being experienced journalists understand that we're still learning about the incident. I would say, to our community and to echo some of the mayor's sentiment, if you have information about the individuals who are responsible for this crime, individuals like this should not be able to have any shelter in our community. Regardless of who they are to you, what the relationship they are to you, we need information and people to come forward. We all have a duty and a responsibility in public safety, and that is certainly emphasized when we talk about the least among us. These were babies in the backseat of this car. So we certainly need the public to do their part to assist us with this. We have a great group of investigators that have a very strong track record of bringing closure to families under these circumstances. I do not expect for this to be an exception to that, but it takes time and a lot of diligent work to put the pieces of this horrific puzzle together, but we're working on it. We will now take your questions.
Chief, do we know why this happened, the motive? Was this a targeted attack?
We don't know the question to that. That is something that we certainly hope to answer as we learn more and we're gathering information in our investigation.
What was the relationship between the people in the car?
It is my understanding that there were two women, adult women in the car, and the children were the children of the adult women in the vehicle.
Were the women related, the adults?
I don't know if the women were related or not.
Do we have a suspect?
We do not have any suspects at this time.
Are you able to release the
We're canvassing the area for video, including city footage, any other video that we may have, which is a part of our early part of any investigation of canvassing that area.
Sadly, Chief, we've done enough of these to look ahead, and obviously you can't get past the investigation at this point from what your detectives are telling you, but it doesn't seem like it would take a lot to put together that this vehicle was targeted for some reason, and that would lead to potential gang activity. Have you early on traced this to gang beef of some sort, or mistaken identity of some sort involving a gang in Syracuse?
That is a question that we would hope to be able to answer, to give specifics like that. You have to understand, as it relates to releasing information, I'm very cautious about releasing anything that I cannot 100% stand behind. Because in addition to an arrest, our ultimate goal is to get a conviction with that. So I don't want to put anything in the universe that we cannot support.
You have the two mothers in the car with the children. Do you have a whereabouts of the children's fathers during the shooting?
I do not know about the whereabouts of the fathers.
Are they active in the investigation? Are they part of the questioning?
Everyone will be questioned that we believe that would be able to provide information to us for this investigation.
Do you know the purpose of driving the car from the shooting scene to Lincoln Avenue?
I do not have that information. That is something that we certainly will ask. As you probably could imagine with those two adult women in that vehicle, they probably were hysterical, as any parent would be when you're trying to care for your child that's been shot. So they may have an answer to that, they may not, but we certainly want an answer to that question. Yes, sir.
Hey, Doug, real quick, just as to that, I want to be pretty careful about not leaving anybody with the impression that, despite the fact that children had been shot, they chose to leave the scene. That wasn't the case. They drove away as they were being shot at, and then after she realized the children were injured, she stopped in the 100 block of Lincoln Ave to call 911. So I just want to be very careful, and I want to clear that up with everybody.
So she left for her safety?
Yes, sir.
She fled the scene as she left as she was being shot.
What's the condition of the other two girls? How are they doing?
It is our understanding that the other two victims are in stable condition and are expected to survive.
When you think of how close 3 children are in the back seat, how likely was this as this could have been 2 or 3 deaths?
It's very likely, in that when you just look at the number of kids that were hit, we're very fortunate that we're not talking about 3 deaths or even 5 when you consider the compartment size of a vehicle, which is also why we have to, as a community, if we have information, to please come forward with that, because these kids can't protect themselves. We have a duty as a society to do what we can to protect kids under these circumstances.
Is there a description of the other vehicle?
We do not have a description at this time. That's one of the things that we're trying to shore up as a part of our early investigation, and we certainly hope to discover those kinds of things as we continue to look into the information that we have.
Chief, for you and Mr. Mayor, we have Eva Fold, Connie Turi, now this. The most vulnerable among us in our community have been targeted in hideous ways, or fallen victim to heinous crimes. Who is safe in Syracuse and who isn't?
Well, I think the vast majority of communities, if we take this from a micro to macro, obviously the critical incidents that you've just described, these very vulnerable individuals that are victims of homicide, is horrific. They are something that we don't see every day in our community, so I certainly don't want to leave the community with this feeling that you can't walk down the street in the city of Syracuse. But it is a part of a disturbing pattern. Obviously last year our violent crime was up. Early this year, looking at the numbers both individually in our city, in our region, and then nationally, the trend is continuing for an increase in violent crime despite being up last year. We're seeing early signals that we're on that pattern yet again. But I do not believe that the majority of our citizens are in any danger from being victims of these types of crimes. We have challenges. There's no secret that we have gangs in our cities. There's no secret that many of those disagreements result from drug wars and things that gang people are involved in, which sometimes ultimately ends up with innocent people being killed. It's rare in our community, but anytime you have one incident like this, if it happens every 20 years, it's too much, because 84 and 93 and 9-month, 10-month-old kids should not be getting shot or killed in any community. So that's bad for us, which is why we try to work with our community to make sure that these things don't happen. But when they do, at least try to give the family some closure with the success of an arrest and conviction.
Mr. Mayor, who is safe in the city that you lead and who's not? Because that's on a lot of people's minds right now.
Well, Michael, I think that the chief said it. The majority of people in the city of Syracuse are safe on a day-to-day basis. But what these terrible tragedies show us is that no one is immune from these conditions. This happened less than a mile from my home. It happened less than a mile from a suburban community. I think oftentimes we lull ourselves into a false sense of security that violence is specific to certain neighborhoods or certain communities or certain geographies, and it's not. As the chief said, we are seeing spikes in violence across this country. There are far too many guns on the streets across this country and in this city, and gun violence and violence in general is a public health crisis, both in the city of Syracuse and the United States of America. And we need to treat it as such.
Mayor, clearly for this to happen, something isn't working. What changes today to fix the problem that led to this?
Andrew, if I had the ability to fix the senseless violence that's happening in this community, or if the chief did, we would have done it yesterday. There are so many conditions that lead to what we're dealing with, and as I said, what we're dealing with is not unique. But it is a crisis, and I don't think enough people treat it as a crisis. So we're doing everything we can. SPD is doing everything they can. We have a gun violence suppression detail that is out on the streets every day trying to get guns off of the streets. But as we have once again very painfully experienced, it's not enough. We have to do more. So we're going to do everything within our power to make sure that something like this hopefully never happens again in this community. And again, those that are responsible are held accountable to the fullest extent of the law. There are no, go ahead.
What message do you have for the community, especially people who are hearing about this, families with young children?
We can all relate to this. We can all relate to this. All of us up here have daughters. This hits home in a very real way. Again, something is broken in our society. And this is just the latest tragic example of it. We need to take care of each other. We need to take way better care of each other. And that's just not of our family and our friends, that's of our community. Again, I think far too often it's easy to separate yourself and to say, oh, it's arm's length. It hits a little, maybe they say it hits a little too close to home. It's in our home. Violence is in every single one of our homes, whether you're dealing with it directly or indirectly, whether you live in the city of Syracuse or in the suburbs. This is a problem that all of us need to work together to solve. But the reality is we as a community are not taking care of each other. And we need to start doing that. Otherwise, the chief and I will be up here again.
Obviously, one of your initial reactions to this comes from the position of mayor. But at what point in the last 12 hours did your dad side of you kick in and realize that these are children?
Well, when I saw the message come across my phone, I was with my children. And I got in the car and I was heading down to Lincoln Ave thinking that, it was a little bit further away. And I come up to an intersection, again, less than a mile from my house, and it was right there. This is, it's impossible to separate being mayor from being father, from being family, from being friend. And I don't think we should try to separate it. Again, this is our community. This impacts all of our lives. And no one can afford to dismiss it or to say, well, it's not my neighborhood. This is our community. And we need to take care of each other and protect each other. We're not doing a good enough job of that.
Chief, this really is personal, because I've been a defender and a promoter of the city of Syracuse for all of the 20 years that I've been reporting the news here. And lately, that has become a difficult position to take. And I've asked this same question when we've all been gathered here for other heinous crimes. Is this our destiny? Is this the way things are going to be in the city of Syracuse?
Well, I think you're painting too broad of a brush from a critical incident. We don't have these kind of press briefings every day, nor should we ever have this kind of press briefing. But there's no secret that we're in an urban community. There's no secret that urban communities across the United States struggle with concentrated violent crime. There are many socioeconomical elements that create crime as it comes to the surface. We have many of those. There's no single solution to the things that frustrate you, that frustrate this police department, that frustrate City Hall, which is why we try to have our collective efforts in looking at these issues. You've never seen this police department attempt to solve these kinds of issues alone, because we recognize that the issues are far too complex. I do not believe this is a part of our destiny. I believe this is a part of our disappointment. And we have them from time to time, as any community has disappointments. But when you talk about the loss of life, that's something that's very unforgiving, which is why we need people to come forward to attempt to help us with these kinds of things, so that we can hold these individuals accountable for their behavior. But I still think that this is a good city. We are a city with challenges. I knew that when I walked in the door as a police chief coming in from the outside. I knew exactly what I was signing up for. Fortunately, I have not been up here at this podium with a lot of conversations like this, but I've had some, and I understand that I'm going to have those. I hope that I never have another one, but I do understand that by and large, this is a good city. We have challenges. We have horrific things that happen from time to time, but we're able to get through those things only when we work together. We don't allow ourselves to become derailed or finger point as to who we think is responsible for this. There are many things that are broken when you see these kinds of things happen in your society.
Chief, what are some specific next steps for the investigation?
Well, we want to continue to get into the neighborhood, get into the area where the incident occurred. We want to interview anyone that may have information concerning that. We'll obviously get a lot of anonymous tips that we'll need to comb through those. We need to look at physical evidence. We'll need to look at our camera systems, everything that we have available to us to be able to get traction. The one thing that I continue to lean on and I continue to promote because they deserve it, this team has about an 80 to mid 80% clearance rate on homicides. I trust when they tell me that we're going to solve a case. I believe in them, which is why some of the times that you guys may be a little frustrated because they're telling me not to reveal anything. You want me to reveal everything. When I have that tug of war going on as I do, more often than not, I'm going to lean towards the individual that are giving me an 80% plus clearance rate because I don't want to do things to unintentionally hurt their investigations. But we're going to lean very heavily on their expertise and then the support of the community, which is the #1 driver of us being able to do this so that we can give this family some closure.
Chief, what is the relevance of the blue complex at the intersection of Grant and South Geddes? Our crew has seen them digging in a yard. Do we know anything about that?
I do not know anything about that.
I'm not sure if I missed this earlier. Do we know where the gunfire came from? Was it a passing vehicle, someone on the street? Do police know?
We believe it was a vehicle.
Were the two vehicles in motion at the time, or was the victim's vehicle stationed?
That I do not know, sir. That's something we certainly will be looking into to be able to answer that question.
Do
Are you
we?
able to identify the victim at this point? Publicly identify the victim at this point?
You mean by name?
Yeah.
We're not doing that intentionally. It's a good question and fair question. Obviously, given the age of the victims, this is very, very sensitive for the family, and we do not want to get out ahead of what they're doing internally with their family. Obviously, the next of kin have been notified, but we don't know how far that has went for them. So those kinds of things, again, given the sensitive age of these kids, we want to protect their privacy.
Do we know where the group of 5 women were headed when this began?
I do not know that question at this time. That's something that we hope to be able to answer, if it's relevant.
The mayor brought up the location of this and the proximity to his own home.
Yes, sir.
This crime. This crime also occurred near a school where the President of the United States' late wife once taught. And given that connection and the fact that that might make news, it's possible that the White House might, at some point today, be made aware of this crime. And I'm wondering, given the legislation that the White House put forward last week on guns, if there's a message that you have as chief of police on that and for the president and for lawmakers who are considering.
Well, I would first, given what happened in recent history with the stimulus money that we were able to get to our city, considering what we've been through over the past 18, 24 months, I would thank the White House for the $126 million or so that they've given our community to help us to be able to try to combat some of these things. One of the things that you'll see in our budget is 2 classes to hire more officers is in that budget, and money to be able to address many of the quality of life issues that are some of the preceding things, conditions-wise, that happen before you see violent crime. I would also ask our president to continue to look at what we can do nationally to address gun violence in our community. This is not something that we can do individually at the local level or the county or state, and any help from a national standpoint would be appreciated. But I'm sure that the president is seeing these kinds of things happen in cities all across the United States, and Syracuse is not alone. And we would be certainly appreciative of any help that we could get nationally with gun violence.
Deputy Chief, if you wouldn't mind going back up for one more question, because you're supervising officers and detectives, investigators who are working this crime scene right now in these locations. And some of them have young children at home, and I'm wondering what you do for them, what you say to them, how they are handling this, because this is not run of the mill. This is a baby.
Yeah, it's a great question. They're professionals. Everybody that works here is human. the police department, the fire department. These things affect everybody in different ways. But they're professional. They compartmentalize it. They'll get the job done. We do have a good peer support program here, an officer wellness program, and a lot of resources that are available to our officers as well as folks that are outside of our agency, other agencies as well. You know, so we have support systems in place for things like this. But I appreciate you asking that question because, you know, in every case, whether it's this case with an 11-month-old who was killed and a 3 and an 8-year-old who were killed, but in every case, you know, there's a brother, a sister, a daughter, a grandmother, a father, and we can all relate to that. And so I appreciate you asking that question because there's a human side to this job that I think is often overlooked. But everybody's a professional and they get the job done.
There were 3 children who were struck by bullets and 2 women who apparently weren't. Do you believe the children were targeted?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
There were 3 young children who were all struck by bullets and 2 women in the same vehicle who apparently weren't. Do you believe the children were specifically targeted?
It's too early to tell. I don't have any reason to believe that they were, but it's just too early to give you any kind of answer on that.
Deputy Chief, can you talk about what investigators are doing at the scene right now? Are they recovering bullets?
I don't know who's at the scene right now. I haven't been there yet this morning. They may well be. We're going to be doing a lot of work at the scene. We have different scenes. You know, certainly we have the scene in the 300 block of Grant Avenue. There was a scene last night down in the 100 block of Lincoln Avenue that we've talked about, and then there's the scene at the hospital. So there's a lot of evidence to be processed, collected, and we'll do all of that. So if there is somebody down there now, then I'm sure they're working on that.
Deputy Chief, can you speak on the children's fathers, if they're involved in their upbringing, if they're involved in last night's incident?
Yeah, I don't have that information for you.
And what are the next steps specifically? Camera footage, physical evidence like bullets?
All that. So we'll be doing a number of things, as you might imagine, at once. We'll be looking first and foremost to speak to people, interview people, and I'll reiterate, please, the request that the mayor and the chief have made. If there's anybody that has any information that can pass it along to us, you can remain anonymous. You can call the Criminal Investigations Division or leave a tip at the tip 411. The Criminal Investigations number is 315-442-5222. We would appreciate any information, but to your point, we want to speak to people. We'll be canvassing the neighborhood for you know, videos the chief mentioned, cops camera footage, collecting and processing evidence, search warrants at some point. So there's going to be a lot of work being done. A lot of it's going to be done at once. So there's really no first step. There's a lot of work that's going to be getting done.
Do you worry people won't come forward?
You know what? I think in this case, with 3 children, I feel pretty good about it.
The car that the women were in, did they own the car? One of the women.
I don't know who the registered owner was at this point. I don't know.
Do you know where they were headed, what their destination or plans were?
I don't.
Chief, is the Syracuse Police Department currently utilizing the shot spotter? Are they using that? And then also, is there anything from your perspective that the city can do to, I guess, help your department when it comes to cases like this?
To answer your first question, ShotSpotter is currently not active in the city. We are working diligently to get that back reinstated in our community. It's part of our budget that we're getting ready to present to Common Council, but we're getting a little bit ahead of that for this kind of reason, to be able to have any sort of force multiplier technology that may be able to aid us in that, but the ShotSpotter is not currently active in the city, but we're working on that. As far as the things that we need, obviously, a chief can never have too many police officers. I've been budgeted for 2 classes with the 2022 budget that we have coming forward, and we will have money to be able to address again some of the quality of life things that are going on in our community. We will have funding to address that, and other technology that we're reviewing to either increase or get additional technology to help our city to try to address some of these things. But from a resource standpoint, I feel like that we're adequately resourced. We can never have too many police officers, but I feel like that we have the funding and the resources that we need to do the job.
And I'm sorry if this was addressed, but with 3 children and 2 mothers, I'm assuming that one of those kids or 2 of them are siblings. Was the child who died, did they have a sibling or were they only child?
I don't know the relationship of the three kids. It's a good question, but we certainly will learn that at some point. And again, many of the family dynamics things that we have we're not releasing because to protect the privacy of the family, but I don't have that information today. Yes, go ahead.
Can neighbors expect increased patrols in that area, and if so, over what period of time?
Well, the southwest section of our city is an area that is all too familiar with violent crime. There's no question that if you look at our data, it's kind of ground zero for where a disproportionate number of our violent crime incidents occur in that part of the city. They will continue to see a strong presence as they always have. As the mayor stated, in addition to our patrol, we have the gun violence suppression team that is out. They've been very successful since we've had them on the street, so we will continue to be able to hit the locations and going after specific individuals that we believe to be responsible for violence in our community.
How close was the nearest officer when the incident happened on Sunday? Do we know?
I don't know the answer to that question.
If this was not somehow mistaken identity, if it was not that, then it was a targeting of children, right? Am I, not being a police officer, not being a longtime detective, I don't know, but I can't reconcile this one or the other thing. If it was not, they thought whoever was firing these bullets thought somebody that they wanted to kill was in the backseat of that car, and that was not the case, or they knew it was children and they did it anyway.
I think the question is far too complex to answer at this stage of an investigation. I would hope that no human being would intentionally fire into a vehicle specifically targeting young children. I would hope that someone who's even capable of violent crime would have a line that they're not willing to cross. Regardless of whether they intended to hit the kids or not, there's a baby that's dead. And we're going to hold the individuals who are responsible for that accountable for that. But to answer your question, it's too early in our investigation to be able to address that. Just in closing, we certainly want to keep this family in prayer. If you know this family, reach out to them, wrap your arms around them. If you are a community individual, as the mayor said, just because this did not happen in your family or outside your door, we're all impacted by this. We will only be able to give this family some bit of closure for this by getting an arrest and conviction for the individuals who are responsible. We can't do it without your help, and we certainly need the public to do their part. We appreciate you all being here today. Thank you.
Thank you.
"30-minute news conference from the Syracuse Public Safety Building featuring the police chief, the mayor, and a deputy chief of the Syracuse Police Department for an unthinkable crime, which is hard to describe other than the words used by the mayor and the chief. We'll recap what happened in case you just joined us. It was about 10 minutes to 7 last night when police say two vehicles passed each other on the 300 block of Grant Avenue. Now this is near the intersection of Bellevue Avenue, South Geddes Street, a little before 7 last night. Someone in the passing vehicle shot into the other vehicle and struck with the gunfire 3 young girls in the back seat of that car. An 11-month-old baby girl was killed by the gunfire. A 3-year-old girl and an 8-year-old girl were wounded. They're in stable condition at the hospital and are expected to survive. The women in the front of the car, there were 2 adult women in the front seats of that vehicle with the children in the back. They were not struck by gunfire, but those women are said to be the mothers of the little girls in the back. The suspect vehicle left the scene. The vehicle with the children in it went on to the 100 block of Lincoln Avenue, where by that time the adult women in the front of the car had realized those children had been hit by gunfire, pulled over, and called police to Lincoln Avenue. They then responded to Grant Avenue, where they realized the shooting had occurred. The suspect vehicle was not identified. Police did not give us any suspect description as far as individuals. But the mayor came up to the podium to talk to the press, and he says this crime happened less than a mile from where he lives, here on the southwest corner of the city, just on the edge of the Strathmore neighborhood. Mayor Ben Walsh calls it a nightmare, an unimaginable tragedy, and the definition of a senseless crime. Incomprehensible was the other word that the mayor used. He and Police Chief Kenton Buckner urged the public, as did Deputy Chief Derek McGork, to turn any information they have over. The chief indicated they are already getting some anonymous tips. In the words of Chief Buckner, he said there should be no shelter for whoever committed this crime last night. It was horrific. The chief said it is very likely that all 5 people in that vehicle could have been killed given the reckless action or the intentionally reckless action of whoever shot into that vehicle. He said it's very likely that all 3 children could have been killed and the 2 adults in the front of the car could have been killed. Was this a targeted attack, the chief was asked? He said, we don't know. He was asked about gangs. He said, we don't know. They are canvassing the neighborhood. They're looking for any video that may exist of this crime. He did say later in the briefing that there's no secret that there are gangs in this city, but he would not tie gang activity directly to this crime last night. When he and the mayor discussed a recent crimes in the city, the murder of retired school teacher Eva Fuld at Grant Village, the murder of another retired teacher, 93-year-old Connie Torrey at the Skyline Apartments, and now the shooting death of an 11-month-old baby girl, and the wounding of a 3-year-old girl and an 8-year-old girl. The chief did concede this is a disturbing pattern of violent crime, even though the incidents are isolated. The mayor went even further. He said that something is broken in our society, that we need to take better care of each other, and that we simply have too many guns on the street. He said guns and gun violence is a public health crisis in our community and across America. The investigation continues. Our coverage will continue at noon into the shooting death of an 11-month-old girl and the wounding of a 3-year-old girl and an 8-year-old girl in what was described as a drive-by shooting. One car, somebody from one car shot into the other car last night on the 300 block of Grant Avenue. This is off of South Geddes Street, not far from the intersection with Bellevue Ave, and happened just before 7 o'clock last night. This neighborhood is adjacent to the old Shea Middle School and Bellevue Elementary School, and as the mayor said, it's less than a mile from where he lives with his family. Terrible crime, now under investigation by the city of Syracuse. It's 11:38 now. We'll end our special report. We will send you back to what's left of The View, and then at noon we'll be joined with continuing coverage of this story here on News Channel 9.